Greetings all, and welcome to another session here of Tuzi Talks. Today we're going to be looking a little bit more at the Call Dimensions textbook, as you can see right over here. We're going to be looking at the theories of second language acquisition and how the theories of second language acquisition are being impacted, or how they impact call-related ideas. So the first thing that we're going to look at is basically what do you mean by a theory, and then we'll look at some of the major second language acquisition theories that are out there today. We're just going to do a quick overview of those. So if you want to get a more in-depth feel for what these theories are, you're going to have to go look at another video. This is just a quick overview so that we can look at those theories in light of how they're being used with technology, with computer-assisted language learning. Let's just jump real quick into our lesson here and talk a little bit about what is a theory and why do they want a theory. People who are involved in using technologies, especially people who are doing research and development in call-related activities, want to be able to develop a tool, want to be able to develop activities or some type of application based on some language acquisition theory. You see, because a theory is going to provide them a position by which they can view a problem. And be able to use that theory to be able to hone in and narrow and focus in on that particular issue. These theories are actually used by, whether you're a teacher or you're a designer or whether you're a researcher, you have those theories. And so you're going to take those theories with you as you start looking at the different technologies. So, of course, the people who are doing research or development of an application, they're doing so based on the theory that they're using as far as their second language acquisition theory. So we want to know what these theories are as we look at these different tools. Today, there are many different types of second language acquisition theories out there. Years ago, there were far fewer, and they were less descriptive. Today, we've got more. And the first one here that I want to show you, which is a rather important one, is going to be interaction theory, and that's by Stephen Krashen. Krashen is still all over the place in the second language acquisition world. Krashen had 5 hypotheses in his theory of second language acquisition: the acquisition learning hypothesis, the monitor hypothesis, the natural order hypothesis, the input hypothesis, and the affective filter. Those 5 theories altogether formed his theory for second language acquisition. Acquisition learning basically stated that people acquire a language, they don't learn a language, so you can't sit in a classroom and say, this is a pen, or these are the rules, this is the meaning, and then be able to learn language. You had to acquire it simply by being in the environment. The monitor hypothesis was that your brain and your mind were actually monitoring what's going on. And the easiest example of that is when you say something, and after you say it, you stop and say, oh, wait a minute, that's not what I meant to say. An example of that could be inside, what's the name of
Hats, coats, galoshes over here. But hurry, please. We have so much time and so little to see. Wait a minute. Strike that. Reverse it. Thank you.
If you remember that example, you remember that he said it, and then oh, wait a minute, that's not right. He monitored what was happening in his words. So we monitor. There's a natural order, the next point here, the natural order of language learning. There's a natural order the way we learn things. And generally, the idea is that we go from less complex to more complex, or more frequently used to less frequently used. That's the idea behind the natural order. That we have input, lots of input, like a baby, where you give them lots of information. You read them stories, you give them music, they watch TV, they do all this input that's coming, and you need lots and lots of input. And finally, you have an affective filter, that you filter what is coming into your mind through your senses based on the affective condition of yourself, whether you're emotionally upset or whether you have stress, more upset, your filter is bigger and the filter is higher and there's less information that can get through. So those are the 5 points, okay? It was later discovered, so anyway, Krashen has greatly impacted the world of second language acquisition. There are many people who grabbed onto this, and some people who also not only grabbed on, but found out that later on that it wasn't necessarily as good. So you can go look up Krashen and see some of the things that he's done. But you can also find articles like this related to how Krashen's ideas were adopted in certain places, and the results were not good because of the natural order hypothesis was simply not, I'm sorry, the acquisition learning idea wasn't actually enough. That input was necessary, but it certainly wasn't sufficient. So not only did they need to have input, but they also needed to have some type of interaction. And later researches by people like Long and by Swain learned that they needed input, and they needed interaction, and they needed forced output. And so now we have theories called forced output production, or we have the interaction hypothesis that talks about the need for not only just getting input, but also the need to have interaction, also the need to have forced output. And all of these theories now are working basically in conjunction here. These are all cerebral, individual, mental activities that need to go on. In addition to the interaction and output, Doherty and Williams found out that they needed noticing, and they also needed a focus on form. He described that to be is an actual focus on the grammatical elements or the morphological elements. There are times as you're doing input, as you're doing interaction and output, that there's a time where students will want to focus in on that particular form that they're having difficulty with. And so there is going to be some need to have focus on form. So focusing on form was also there, and is also negotiation of meaning. So you would have this interaction that would be negotiating what is it that something means, and that's very important for the acquisition of a second language. Next on our list here was that we needed some type of comprehensible input. Not only do we need input, okay, just think of input as all this information coming to you all at once. I need input that I can understand. I need input that makes sense. Just as an example, I used to live in Japan, and when I first got there, basically all I heard was, I didn't understand anything. It was all input. I was getting plenty of input, but I didn't understand anything. I couldn't even figure out where words ended and words began. Eventually, after my study, after being there for a while, I would be hearing, I'm going to window, I'm going to open, and I would, oh, hey, I know window, I know open. And those things I would now bring in to the mind, and I could try to process it, because it wasn't just input. It was intake. And we now realize that we need comprehensible input. Now, all of these, mental related activities, all of these mental related research projects, research theories, developed since probably the 1970s, 60s and 70s on, has drastically changed how we view second language acquisition today. And so all of these areas have a major impact. The largest being, of course, Krashen, even with some of the distractions that some of the authors will look at. All of these were very useful in framing a different idea of how a language was acquired. In addition, these ideas were also useful for deciding how to use computer-assisted language learning. So there are some who are out there who are saying, look, I can use these theories for language acquisition. So, for example, Astisimali was doing research on email tutoring and began to see a reaction here where students began to have more confidence as they spoke with native speakers, as they were trying to learn language, and it was all being done through basically email. But you got to see how this input, as it grew, as they were getting more input through this, they began to have more confidence. There was no structure involved here. They weren't looking at the structure of language or the structure of vocabulary. They were just communicating via email. It definitely was a plus. Again, it was a Krashonian type of idea that was being applied to computer-assisted language learning. And so a lot of these theories are still used, and actually they're going to be the primary movers with regard to research in second language acquisition and call. Okay, so these are the major beginners, especially in psycholinguistics. All right, We also have sociocultural theories. The idea that language is not learned in a vacuum, that I need the other, as Bakhtin would say. I need to have that other person around in order to create language. And the foremost or the most important psychiatrist in this area is Vygotsky. And if you know anything about Vygotsky, he was a famous psychologist and language theorist, and a lot of his work we still use today. You can go look up more about him if you're interested. But some of the things that he taught, or he stressed on, was the need to have the other around, that we need to be in groups in order to learn language. And so the teachers, in some sense, were an extension of my consciousness, because they were going to help me learn things. It's kind of like, when you talk to yourself, right? And you're talking to yourself and you're trying to get answers because you're well, your teacher is kind of like this extension of that. And eventually the things that you can do by yourself, as opposed to things that you can do with your teacher, right, is going to help you expand into where your teacher's realm is, so that you can take over that spot. And so this is the whole idea behind some of Vygotsky's work. So teachers helped out these students. They had this zone of proximal development, this I+1. We have input plus a little more. And based on this, we can move out. Okay? You have a small but growing personal learning process in the individual. I'm learning as an individual. It's expanding, but that's because I have someone else helping me. I have a teacher, or in the case of constructivism, I've got other people. I've got groups of people who are helping me learn a second language. One offshoot of this sociocultural theory is activity theory, where students are doing an activity in a group. They're not working on language learning per se. They're completing a task. They've got some activity, and it's the basic unit by which they are focusing. Okay, they're understanding that they want to get the job done. They want to finish this task. And the focus now is no longer on language learning. The focus now is on completing the activity. And how can we complete this activity? So it's a different shift, okay? We're moving away from what's going on in the brain and how language is learned. We're moving on now to, let's focus on language. Let's focus on this activity and how you guys are working together to do that. And so activity theory is now a dynamic network of interacting elements and actors, okay? You see, we're no longer necessarily talking about language, although some of the elements that are going to be involved are going to be language elements. But we're not focusing on that. We're focusing on something else, and language is just going to be learning as we go. You can see that Krashen idea of input and acquiring instead of learning is at play here with these theories. But these are theories that were developed more socioculturally as opposed to just in the mind. You can see how they are playing off one another. The third in the continuing realm here of theories is called constructivism, where people are working basically in a community, and they build a knowledge base because they're out exploring. They're going to build a knowledge base because they're out playing and learning and trying to do things, right? Each person forms their own little representation of what knowledge is. Okay, so they're out exploring and learning and building as they go. They're using all these other people. Not unlike some of the computer games that my kids are using. They play a game called, I think it's called Minecraft. And what they do is they build little communities, and they can work together, and they can borrow and buy and sell and barter and steal and other nice things like that. But they're constructing this reality. People who are learning language can do this as well. People learn because they're out exploring. People learn because they're going out and playing. They're going out and doing. And so this idea of this constructivist idea is where people are interacting with other people, and in so doing, they're building their language. And that learning is going to occur in the social context. It's not going to occur just in the mind. It's going to occur where there's opportunities and interactions going on with a group of other people. In this case, it's going to be with their peers or with their teachers, okay? So with a constructivist idea, you've got lots of group work, you've got lots of pair work, and you've got people interacting throughout. Now, CAL and course content management systems align very well with constructivism. In fact, one of the most important course content management systems that are out there is the one that we're going to be using, which is Moodle. Moodle is a course content management system designed on the theory of constructivism. And so the system was developed that way. You see how it fits in. Call works the same way. So do virtual worlds, so does hypermedia. You can go out and you can explore. So does something like Wikipedia, where people can contribute to things. It's more of a constructivist kind of idea. So you've got Vygotsky's social, the I plus one, the me plus somebody else, that zone of proximal development. You've got Crash and Long, Swain, Dougherty, all talking about how language is being developed in the mind. And then you've got the constructivist group that says, hey, it's a community where we go out and explore and we're learning language. You can see how there's differences between these three. They are all related, of course. Now, those are the major theories that we were just looking at. And overall, again, as I said before, a theory is some way, some idea, some baseline for which we can justify an approach to using a method, or an approach to using some call-related activities. And so that's what the overall purpose of that theory is. Now, when we're going into designing things, we're gonna be able to design something based on a particular theory. The theory provides a foundation by which we can build call materials. So the theory is going to provide the foundation. The theory is going to be able to allow us to structure and create interactions because we're using that theory in order to build those interactions. It's going to help us develop a view of who the learner is. Is the learner just in his mind and trying to find input or intake for this person, or is he going to need that other person, or is it more of a constructivist way of doing this? What types of software are you going to be building? Are you building software that requires interaction? Are you building software that requires no interaction, with other people, just interaction between you and the screen type of thing? With regard to teaching, these theories are going to impact how a teacher is going to be using these materials. Because, again, the theories that we're talking about provide a framework for teaching, a methodological framework for teaching. It's going to guide how teachers choose activities. Okay, whether they're going to choose an activity that's going to focus on form or whether it's not going to focus on form, whether it's an individual activity or whether it's a group activity. And of course, it's going to highlight issues involved with course content management systems. How are we going to be using this software, or what software should we be using? What activities should we be using in order to make the biggest impact on our students? Okay. Finally, in research, this is where it's much more obviously theoretical, because they're out there testing these things, and after they test things related to call and second language acquisition, they come up with some type of conclusions or suggestions, which are given to designers and teachers to try and play with. So researchers use theories to provide some kind of a foundation for hypothesis testing. Okay, we're going to have this crash and theory. Let's test it and see if it works. As I tried to show you earlier with this crash and burn, basically what's happened is that you saw somebody who took his ideas and tested them out, and then we saw what happened as a result of those. Researchers also use theories to identify variables. They try to explain relationships, or try to design, activities or learning opportunities. That's the reason for all these theories. And you see, these theories, just as in teaching, are being used when people are looking at choosing or designing computer applications for us. Now, the sad part for most of us is that many of us are not designing software. We're not designing or even picking. Well, maybe we may be picking software if we have that money capability, or the opportunity to go out and choose. But for many of us, we don't have an opportunity to choose and or develop. We're stuck with what other people give us. But we should have those theories as we go and try to teach. The nice thing is we have lots of different theories now available. In the past, there were very few theories. It was the grammar translation method, and you learned by rote memorization, and that was the only way that you went about and did it. Today, there are a variety of theories, from those who are still saying rote memorization, and when you take second language acquisition, you're going to find that there are actually some times where rote memorization is a good thing. We're not going to go into that now. But we have a lot more theories now. And these theories are rich in not only their research, but also in their ramifications. And so there's a range of different applications that we could be using now because these theories are now available. And different theories that are taken by different call developers means that we have different applications that we can be using. Yay! That's the overview of the theories now. And we want to, of course, look at these theories and say, how can I take these theories when I'm trying to design not only materials, but design my own teaching? So there's theory-driven design. I'm going to make the theory drive what applications I choose. I'm going to let the theory drive what applications I try to develop or test. And so for people who are doing that, they're going to use, for example, if it's rationalism, they're going to try to use pure reason. Okay? And that theory is going to be what drives them. If, for example, someone is a Krashonian, they believe that Krashen's ideas are the best. They're going to be looking for activities that are not going to be focused on form specific. They're not going to focus on things like morphology or Latinates. They're going to simply try to provide opportunities where you have lots of interaction, real live interaction. So they may be focusing more on just using things like YouTube or Skype in order to interact with people, in order to get lots of input. Not necessarily focus on anything of a traditional linguistic manner. Theory is going to be driving what they select. You can have a cyclical design, which I certainly do like. It's a design that looks at practical considerations. It thinks about what's happened in the earlier iteration, and then when it comes around again, it revises and makes things better. It's more practical in that sense. What works is really what that's saying. During the design process, you reflect on what's going on, and you look at what was good and what wasn't good, what worked and what didn't work, and you revise and try again. That's good research there as you're designing activities. And you may find that this activity that you're using, this software that you're using, may be a good thing, and you decide that this is a worthwhile activity because you see progress in your students. And maybe you don't. You decide to throw that activity or that software away because it's not working the way you want it to. That's more of a cyclical design. That's more practical. And I'll be perfectly honest, there are going to be some people who don't like the practical because it doesn't adhere to a theory that I like. But, I mean, that's going to be up to you. That's going to be up to your school. I have worked at places where I was told, you must use this software. You must use these materials because these are the materials that we're going to be researching. And I may not have liked them. I may not have thought that they were worthwhile, but I had to use them. In the 1960s and 70s, there was a theory out there called audiolingual method. Audio-lingual method, where you would hear and repeat. There was no reading, there was no writing. And I know of teachers who said they didn't like the method, but that was what they were told to use, and so therefore that's all they used. There was no reading and writing. Even though there were students who were writing answers down on their jeans because they wanted to be able to see what it is they were saying. The theory was pushing them, right? The cyclical design, again, is more descriptive, as opposed to the theory-driven design. All right. We're going to be looking at teaching. There are a variety of these theories that you can see within teaching. One of them is called task-based language teaching, TBLT, task-based language teaching. According to Daugherty and Long, it's really not a second language acquisition theory, but it's more a theory of teaching. Basically, task-based language teaching is a theory where the students focus on a task and not on language learning. So they focus on a task and they try to finish the task. Their focus is on the task and not on the language. Also, Egbert, Chaus, Hansen, Smith were looking at the optimal conditions for using call activities. Now, this is a group of these three guys here are actually saying, look, if we're going to use call-related stuff, what's the best situation? Because that tells you right now there are times where you don't want to necessarily use call if you can avoid it. And nowadays, you see there are a lot of people who are saying online, online, online. Just like you're watching this video is online. Online is not necessarily the best way all the time. Face-to-face is, in my opinion, better. Being face-to-face in a room with someone is oftentimes better because you have more communication cues. It's multimodal, much better, because there's seeing, there's hearing, there's touching. You can sense the tension or the ambiance in the room. Many more things that are going on there, but it's not always possible. So, what are the optimal conditions for using call-related things? Well, the first is to have the opportunity to interact and negotiate. So if you're going to be using some type of software, that software should be interactive in some sense. Whether it's interactive with its, the user or interactive with other users, I don't know. But you've got to find some way you can interact. Negotiating, obviously, is going to require someone else. And whether that person you're negotiating with is sitting right next to you or sitting somewhere else on the internet in negotiating is going to be an important facet. That would be optimal. Another optimal condition would be to be able to interact in the target language and with an authentic audience. In other words, I'm going to be able to practice in English with native English speakers. If I'm learning French, I'm going to be able to interact in French with native French speakers. Third point here is that the students are involved in an authentic task. They're not, in a task they're just creating just to complete. It's authentic task. Number 4, that they're exposed and create varied language. So students are exposed to this variety of language, not pre-designed, pre-usable language, but they can create, they can vary, they can use quote-unquote real language. That's a better opportunity. Number 5, they have an opportunity to think about what they're going to be doing and saying, and they're going to have an opportunity to get feedback. It's very interesting when you put 2 foreign students together and say, comment on your students' papers, on their writing, and you'll have these students, and some of them freak out, especially students who are from Asia. They do not like the pressure of having to react and give feedback right now. They would much rather be able to sit back and have time to read and analyze and think about, and then to be able to write up a response. They also like the quote-unquote distance that online can give them, because if they're saying something that's harsh, they don't want to be around when that other person reads it necessarily. So giving them time, giving them opportunity to receive feedback is going to be better for them. It's going to lower their affective filter and give them more time that they would need as opposed to a native speaker. Number 6, that they're going to be guided to and attend to meaning. Okay, not necessarily linguistics. They're not going to be focusing on the syntax or the morphology of something, but they're going to be focusing on what this stuff means so they can actually communicate. It's really what these guys are talking about here. Number 7, they work in a low-stress environment. Low stress is always going to be better. I don't necessarily would believe that. There are times, and there are people who enjoy stress. Not too much stress, but they enjoy stress. So with regard to the Krashen's affective filter, shouldn't be too high, shouldn't be too low. We're going to have some kind of happy medium, just like Goldilocks. It's got to be just right. Okay. Lastly, they want the call is going to support autonomy. Students can do this by themselves. They don't need a teacher. At this point, if it's a good activity, if it's all optimal, the teacher now just becomes a facilitator. He becomes, as someone once said, a guide on the side. They're going to be able to sit there and provide just little bits of information. The student's going to be able to do that all by themselves. Optimal conditions for using call-related software. These are the kinds of things. So if you can't work with autonomy, if you're going to have more, if you have less interaction, well, you may not want to be using call as much. So these are the ideas of Egbert, Chow, Hansen, Smith. Let's move on here to looking at some of the theories of research that are being used most often. Researchers tend to use one or a few theories. But the odd thing is learning is characterized by the theory, and the theory enables data collection, which makes the researcher take different paths. Therefore, you need to be careful about the research that you're looking at and the conclusions that you look at. when you're seeing what these researchers are doing, you need to understand that. They are picking one theory or they are picking two theories, and they're going to be analyzing and assessing their data based on those theories. So you need to be careful. Always it is good to look at research that is multimodal. Research that is triangulated. It's collecting data not only from one source but multiple sources. Not only from one sense but multiple senses. The more data that can be collected, it's going to be a richer description, or it's going to be a more robust analysis when doing research. Now again, most of you who are listening to this will probably not be doing much research. But if you're going to be interested, if you're going to be planning on doing research, I would definitely recommend that you do a multimodal, triangulated approach to researching call and any of the second language acquisition theories that are going to be available to you. All right, let's recap. There are a lot of theories out there, and the theories mean that we have a variety to choose from as we look into picking and using and evaluating call-related applications. The odd thing is, it's not odd. I take that back. Rationalists tend to be more respected. People who are doing research and their conclusions are based on numbers tend to be more respected as opposed to those that are using more qualitative style research and therefore qualitative style call applications. I don't know why that's necessarily the case, but apparently there's more clout that way. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're right, but know that the rationalists tend to be viewed as smarter as opposed to the constructivists or the socioculturalists. Again, be aware that there are multiple theories out there, and be aware that there are multiple philosophical perspectives. You're going to start talking to someone related to second language learning, and you're going to soon find out, well, they're more geared toward Krashen, or they're more geared toward Swain and output theory, and you're going to be able to notice these things as you're talking with other people within the second language community. And the software that these people choose will also probably show those perspectives. Be careful for poorly communicated theories that can have dramatic consequences when they're put into practice. Again, as I showed you before with the crash and burn, that it was put into practice and it had some devastating results. We are dealing with people, and when we try to put a theory into practice and it's not a good theory or not a useful theory, we can damage or waste the time of those who we are teaching. Theories are well and good, and we should have them, but they should not replace an approach that's based on reflective experience. Okay? All this to say, I may have a theory, but as I look at how I'm doing this, or I look at how this activity or this software is working, this seems to be working, I'm going to go forward with this, even if it doesn't necessarily match the theories that I like. And that's all that I want to cover for today with regard to theory and second language, the second language acquisition theories and call. If you do have any questions, you can certainly holler me down below with a text or a message, and I'll get back to you. Have a nice day now.